Hello boys and ghouls, welcome to today's episode of The Monster Vault. We're going to be checking out one of horror's most heroic monsters. In the golden age of VHS grime, there was one monster who mopped his way into being a cult legend. This is the story of the Toxic Avenger.
The Toxic Avenger. The first superhero born out of nuclear waste. Holy shit!
Released in 1984 by Troma Entertainment, aka the gods of low-budget cinema, Troma Entertainment is who Blumhouse wants to be. If you do know them, you either absolutely love their trashy grindhouse vibe or you absolutely hate it. This movie was their radioactive baby. It rocketed them to fame. Even if you have no idea of who the actual production company was, at some point you have probably encountered a version of the Toxic Avenger.
Class of Mutant High, the best cartoon ever.
The Class of Mutant High.
Is that what it's called?
The Toxic Crusaders.
Toxic Crusaders, thank you.
Our story begins in Tromaville, the toxic waste capital of the world, where our protagonist Melvin lives. Now, Melvin's not exactly the hero type. In fact, he's a big loser. He's the classic nerd stereotype and comes across as a little mentally challenged. He's got this high-pitched voice, awful wardrobe, and zero self-esteem. Yet, he still contributes to society and works as a janitor at Tromaville Health Club, where everyone is either a bully, a sleaze, or a little bit of both.
Everything you just said completely describes the first Captain America movie.
Very reminiscent of Captain America, isn't it? He gets relentlessly bullied. You can't have an 80s movie without some kind of bullying. But Melvin's bullies are on a different level. They are absolutely insane. These people, for fun, spend their time reenacting Death Race 2000. They go out on the roads, joyrides, unaliving as many people as they possibly can. To be honest, when you actually watch the movie, I know you're supposed to feel sorry for Melvin being bullied by these people, but when you see what these bullies do to kids and random people, Melvin has it actually pretty easy.
Does he?
Yeah, because they're not trying to they're not trying to unalive him. These bullies one day decide to mess with Melvin at work and publicly get him to make out with a sheep. Melvin, absolutely humiliated, runs off and smashes through a window. As he falls out this window, he perfectly lands in a vat of toxic waste. And it's so over the top. Everything clearly has been set up so that he's meant to fall in the toxic waste, but it's perfectly Troma. As Melvin's skin is melting off his face, one of the bullies comes down and shouts out, "He's faking it. If he can't take a joke, he stinks." And it's one of the best examples of gaslighting I've ever seen in a movie. His skin is literally bubbling and melting off of his face, and that guy still has the audacity to be like, "He's faking it." Melvin makes it home, jumps into the bathtub to wash off the acid and soothe his burns. I'm not sure if it's the water that triggers the transformation or whether it's just a coincidence that he's in the bathtub at the time it begins to happen, but Melvin goes full mogwai. His hair starts falling out, his bones restructure, these tumors start appearing all over his body. This is the point where Melvin then morphs into the super tall, super muscly, vigilante mutant that we know as Toxie. And of course, we get another knockout one-liner, this time from Melvin's mum. As she's listening through the bathroom door, she can hear all of the pain and Melvin's moans as his body's like cracking and bubbling and melting, and she goes, "My baby's finally hit puberty." Right away, and rightly so, Melvin freaks out. He has no idea what's just happened to him. He just flees. He runs off down the road, and instinctively, somehow, he runs straight into a crime that's happening. There's this bunch of thugs beating up on a security guard. And here we see how Melvin's character just drastically changes. Without even thinking about it, Toxie goes in and fights these thugs, whereas Melvin would have hid or run off. If you're thinking so far, there's not really been that much gore. I thought there was so much more gore in the Toxic Avenger. This is where in the movie, the gruesome scale has now been turned up to a 10. These thugs get their eyeballs gouged out, they get their noses popped, and he throws these men around the alleyway by their crutches. At one point, he even uses a man's junk as a punching bag. That's what we call absolute cinema. What makes these scenes even better is the team behind them uses full-on practical effects. Troma didn't have a Hollywood CGI budget, so instead they used things like foam latex, buckets of fake blood, oatmeal, bubble wrap, and even condoms. And they said that they recycled as much of the fake blood as they possibly could because they couldn't afford to consistently buy more. But let's be honest, even when you watch that movie now, it holds up way better than any of the 80s CGI movies that we see. I think it even holds up better than some movies from the 90s, especially if you're considering movies like Lawnmower Man, which looks absolute trash. Even if you don't like the look of the practical effects, you have to commend the team for what they accomplished with what they had, because the movie definitely doesn't hold back on the excessive amount of butchery that's actually within the film. So you know they put a lot of love and time into doing all of that. From this fight scene is where you start to really pick up that Toxie might be a superhero, because before this you just go, okay, he's just a mutant now. That's pretty much it. They're not blazingly obvious. Toxie's not shooting lasers from his eyeballs or flying, but we do know right away that he is incredibly strong. He was throwing those men around the alleyway like they were rag dolls. He was able to pick up a refrigerator with ease, not even breaking a sweat. He is very resilient as well, maybe even impenetrable. When we saw him being attacked by the thugs, it was actually hurting them to punch him. And we also saw Melvin catching fire, and I do wonder if he was starting to transform at this point, because it would explain why he was able to run all the way home completely ablaze and still survive. Shortly after the fight, we do get to hear him speak for the first time. We realize now that his voice has completely changed. It's gone very deep, it's very suave, it's very cool, and he sounds more intelligent. He's now able to put sentences together, he can articulate properly, and you do see him go on to become very resourceful and build his own home. These are all signs of increased intelligence. Now, we don't know exactly the extent of how smart the mutation made him, but there could be a possibility for super intelligence. And speaking of increased mental capabilities, I do think as well that he's developed some kind of psychic ability, maybe not psychic, but more like a spider sense. He's consistently able to tell exactly where crimes are happening, and without really talking to somebody, he knows who is a bad guy and who's not. I do recommend watching The Toxic Avenger twice. The first time you watch it, you're just going to be completely absorbed by the excessive gore, the crazy kills, just the all-round kookiness of the movie. But the second time you watch it, you are going to be able to see some of the underlying messages of The Toxic Avenger, because even though you might not think so, there are some serious messages that this film tries to portray. I feel like the biggest thing you learn is that Toxie isn't just a freak walking around in a tutu. He is a walking middle finger to corrupt authority and 80s yuppie culture. Every villain in this movie is a complete caricature of what they are meant to be, but yet none would be classified as a weirdo like Toxie. They're all completely normal looking, and that's all that matters. In fact, some of the villains in this movie are even considered as beautiful. They're all accepted into society. There's a heavy commentary on disabilities and beauty standards. In fact, Sarah, who is Toxie's love interest, falls for Toxie without ever needing to even see him. Now, she is blind, so she's got no choice. But the message is she sees Melvin for the good person he is. She is also one of the nicest, more accepting people within the story. Director Lloyd Kaufman has joked in interviews that the romance was included partly as a parody of typical superhero origin stories, where the hero gets the girl. He wanted Melvin to get more than just revenge. They wanted him to find love, even in a world that was completely toxic. At its heart, the Toxic Avenger is more than a splattered-filled B-movie. It's a satirical exploration of societal issues through the lens of exploitation cinema. Troma Entertainment ensured they showed the deceitfulness that usually accompanies leaders or people with power. The film portrayed authority figures all the way through the story, such as policemen, politicians, and business leaders, as completely corrupt and just self-serving. This depiction serves as a commentary on institutional failures and the abuse of power. In fact, we see Mayor Peter Belgudi, the dodgy leader of Tromaville, is directly involved in various criminal activities. When the Toxic Avenger begins to disrupt his operations by eliminating the criminals, which is really the mayor's job, the mayor seeks to destroy him to maintain his corrupt hold over the city. The mayor doesn't care that there's someone out there making Tromaville a better place, a safer place for everyone to live. He just cares about his own prerogative and agenda. Another serious issue that the Toxic Avenger touches on is the severe issues seen in our environment. The toxic waste that transforms Melvin is a direct nod to environmental negligence. The film uses this element to highlight the consequences of industrial pollution and disregard for ecological well-being. The presence of toxic waste in Tromaville is rampant, with barrels of hazardous material carelessly stored and transported all over the city. Melvin's transformation happens due to this negligence. Now, this is a movie. He was going to transform into a superhero, but in real life, more and more people are developing health issues like asthma, and in certain places like China, you can't even see ahead of you due to the smog being so bad on some of the days. The rest of the story is a feel-good one though, and is a story where we get to see the underdog getting his revenge. There is nothing better than a good revenge story. Melvin embodies the archetype of the marginalized individual, and we've all been there. We've all been bullied or made to feel belittled. We've all felt not good enough. So I feel there's so many people that can relate to Melvin one way or another. Melvin's transformation into the Toxic Avenger symbolizes the empowerment of the oppressed, turning social rejection into a force for justice. Even though we all try to be good, we've all had those thoughts where we wish for something bad to happen to those who have made our lives hell. The feel good comes from being able to live through Melvin and watching him get his revenge and his justice. Although this movie speaks to so many people on so many different levels, it actually was a flop. It only got given about $500,000 to be produced, and I know that sounds like a lot, but for a movie that's very, very little. Once the movie hit theaters, it only raked in about $140,000. With the budget being so low, Troma Entertainment couldn't really afford to market the movie at all. The marketing they did release was, it's so bad, it's good. Didn't really hit with the cinema goers of the 80s, who at the time were heavily into quite serious horror like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. About a year later, random movie theaters and places started doing midnight showings of the movie, and this is where it surprisingly found great success. It has the similar story of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, where it didn't do so well in theaters. It began to get midnight releases and then became a cult classic. Lloyd Kaufman and Michael Hurst originally conceived the Toxic Avenger to be a parody of superhero and exploitation films, but people loved Toxie so much, the main character became Troma's mascot. The concept evolved from a scrapped project called Health Club Horror and into a loved and perfected comedy. Toxie was so loved that it ended up spawning 4 original movies, with a 5th which is technically gonna be a remake of the first one hitting cinemas this August. And this movie has a star-studded cast, including people like Elijah Wood, Peter Dinklage, and even Kevin Bacon.
Dinklage, he's taking the jobs from the tallies.
I wondered if they were going to make the Toxic Avenger tall, because that's what happens to Melvin. Like, he's quite scrawny and then he gets really big.
Are they short-washing our boy Melvin?
Oh no,
don't take tall jobs away from tall people.
Oh no.
Dinklage should know that.
Don't take tall jobs away from tall people. It works both ways.
It does, Dinklage.
Yeah.
Dinkler.
Troma gradually turned the R-rated Toxie that we all know into a family-friendly character. He was even a huge hit with the kids, as he got a cartoon adaptation called The Toxic Crusaders. And I don't think anyone loves cult classic movies more than theatre kids do. From the Rocky Horror Picture Show to the Repo Man the musical. It was almost inevitable that at some point the Toxic Avenger was gonna get a musical. And he did. It was kind of sad to see how the Toxic Avenger, his character, had evolved from something that was so intense and carried such a strong message to a family-orientated, dancing, singing, family-friendly, character. So I did do some research to see what kind of Toxic Avenger would be in the new movie, and checking out recent interviews and reports, the reboot starring Peter Dinklage aims to modernize the character with a darker storytelling, and it does look like it's gonna go back to the gory practical effects and horrifying death scenes. Overall, going into the original movie, knowing what it is so hard to see any negativity with the Toxic Avenger, or even to slightly criticize it, because everything you could possibly criticize it about, the response is easily, it's meant to be like that. You could say the gore is too excessive. Well, yeah, it's meant to be like that. It's Troma. You could say the acting was awful. Well, yeah, it's meant to be like that. It's Troma. There is nothing that you can criticize this movie about that won't end up falling down to you either not getting the joke or not understanding the satire of the movie. And yes, I agree, this movie is not amazing, but at the same point, I don't always understand when people hate on it. I just want to thank all of you that have made it to the end of this video. Be sure to subscribe and let me know what movie you want me to open the vault doors on next. Until then, my friends, stay spooky. Bye.